Welcome to Beginning Calligraphy here in September. We're looking forward to some fun projects for the fall, so I'm glad that you're here. We also will be doing the letter F along with our month name too. So I'll turn the time over to Rachel now. Rachel, I need to make you the co-host. There you go. And I need to spotlight you. There we go. Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the beginning calligraphy class. If you have your packets, have them ready and available. You can use tracing paper and the tools I have on the screen available to use. We have a small brush pen, pencil, monoline pen, a regular pen, and a Crayola. By the end of the class, you will be able to understand the basics of calligraphy, basic stroke, understanding the brush letter basics. We're going to go over a few alphabet drills. We're going to go over our letter of the month, which is F, and different ways to write the word September. You'll learn guidelines and some tips to take home with you. So let's go ahead and get started. It just works best for me if I were to use the tracing paper.
I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a huge lightning right over my house, so if I lose GVTC, come try to rejoin, okay? Rejoin with the same password, meeting ID, and account, okay? Let's keep going.
Same here. I'm getting some crazy weather out here. Okay. Just some basics when you're learning beginning calligraphy. Today I'm going to mainly go over what we would consider modern calligraphy. They also hand lettering calligraphy is another word for it. And I do go over the lowercase, not so much the uppercase, the capital letters. And that's just a side note I wanted to add there. But just some words of encouragement for our beginners, since this is our beginner calligraphy class. Quick note, anyone can hand letter as long as you're willing to practice. Think of lettering as drawing shapes, and lettering is not cursive. While learning this new skill, go slow and controlled. Don't worry about shakiness in the beginning. Focus on each stroke and understand how each letter form is created. And here, I like to go right into the strokes, and I would like for you to pick up any writing utensil of your choice. And I highly recommend doing a warm-up. Anytime you're gonna sit down and practice, anytime you're gonna sit down and do a craft or a project, always start off with your basic strokes and just do rows and maybe a set of 10 up strokes and 10 down strokes and so on. And this is what's going to warm up your muscle memory. And I know this is a beginner class, but I also want you to get a feel of your pen before we jump into the packet, and you're going to understand half the stuff I am going to teach you. So since not everybody might have a brush pen ready available, since it's, again, the beginning, I'm going to show you how you can use a Crayola if that is all you have on hand. So again, calligraphy is broken down into a series of strokes, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate here. We have our upstroke. With the upstroke, you want to start from the bottom up using the very tip of your pen. Let me move this, the lighting. Okay. You want to start from the bottom up, very tip, bottom to top. Very simple. bottom, top, using the tip of your pen. No, hardly any pressure. And then we have our downstroke from the top to bottom, using the side of your pen with full heavy pressure. If you have a flexible tip, these calligraphy pens are created to flex, so don't hesitate to apply pressure. And same thing for the Crayola, you will not break it. So again, that's the downstroke, top to bottom. We have our overturn stroke, starts on the bottom left with light pressure on your tip, curve over. Once you're over the curve, apply pressure on the sidewall and stop. So again, bottom left, light pressure, up over. Once you're over the curve, apply pressure and thick on the downstroke. And then you're gonna have the underturn stroke. Starts on the top left with heavy pressure first, and right before you get to the bottom, you wanna release pressure and come back up and just use the tip of your pen. Again, top left, full pressure, release before the bottom, release pressure and back up with light pressure using the tip of your pen. Compound, it's combining the overturn and the underturn. Starts on the bottom left with light pressure. Once you go over, full pressure and release right before the bottom. With the oval, I like to start as what I like to call about 11 o'clock. So you want to start with light pressure and go clockwise. And just like the overturn, you're going to apply pressure once you're over. And once you come backwards, you're going to release before the bottom and connect or go a little past the point you started. I'm going to repeat that right here. Light pressure, over, full pressure, backwards, up into light pressure where you started. Show you what it's supposed to look like. Okay. Next, we have a reverse oval. It's going to go counterclockwise, so I want to start about 1 or 2 o'clock. Start with light pressure as well. Once I go over, apply pressure, back over into light pressure. That's our reverse oval. And then we have a ascending loop. The ascending loop starts in the middle with light pressure, and you're going to go backwards like a reverse oval, and then past the point you started with full pressure. And then with the descending loop, you would want to start on the top with full pressure down, go reverse, and go reverse with light pressure and stop halfway in the middle of your downstroke. So downstroke, reverse, light pressure, and stop in the middle of your downstroke. That is your basic strokes of calligraphy. I hope you were able to get a feel of what thick and thin strokes are. And we will move on to page 3. And here on page 3, I like to refer this page as a guide. So when you're getting started and you're gonna sit down and do a project and you kind of want to see how these letters connect. And of course you have your basic strokes right here at the top. And see what strokes go into every letter. So again, this is a nice little guide sheet to have off to the side whenever you're going to do a project. Instead of having the whole packet, this is a good one sheet guide. Here in the middle section where the alphabet is, it basically shows you every time I lifted the pen, and you can see every time I lifted the pen, I changed strokes. Or maybe said that backwards. Every time I changed strokes, I lifted the pen. And then here in the alphabet breakdown, I can go ahead and demonstrate a few strokes for you. And I will use my Tombow. It is of Tombow Fudenosuke. It's what we have in our calligraphy class when we are teaching at the library. You'd like to recommend these two for beginners. They're easy to work with. Here I have a green barrel. There's a BS, and that means it's soft barrel. And the blue, it has a BH, and that means it's a hard barrel. And again, these are really good for beginners because once you pick them up, you'll be able to see what works best for you. Everybody's different as far as if they like the hard has more control and the soft has more flexibility. And you'll just find what you like, and then over time, you'll be able to use both of them comfortably. So like I said here, I'm just going to demonstrate how this works. Using a tracing paper, of course, will preserve this sheet. If not, just write directly on your paper, and you can always print out another one or even pick it up from the library. Basically, simple. We have our entrance stroke, we have a oval, and an underturn. And when you combine the three, that creates the letter A. So again, this is good when you're not quite sure what strokes go into what letter. And I like to use this reference guide here just to go over my more difficult strokes. For example, the letter R and S. It's a one stroke letter. I did break it down into two so you can see what creates the letter R. But doing projects, I highly recommend using it as a one stroke letter. So again, it seems a little hard when you start, but if you practice as a one stroke, it will be a lot easier. So you go up, over with light pressure, and back down without lifting your pen directly into an underhand turn. And up to you to have that loop there. That's something that's more of a modern calligraphy. You could keep it classic with letting go of the loop and just adding a little. I mean, the thing is, this really isn't a stroke. It's part of the letter R. It's not in our basic strokes, but without a loop, there's really no name. So again, practicing the letter R for beginners is best to practice as a one stroke. Same goes for the letter S. It is technically 3 strokes. Again, practice as one stroke. So it's pretty much your letter S, your basic letter S, but with an added entrance stroke and an added exit stroke. So I'll demonstrate that again. Have an entrance, loop it up just as you were going to do the letter S, and stay on the same line and add your exit stroke. You can actually learn how to do the letter S without the loop as well, and continue that way, or even add an extra loop through the bottom. So R and S is, well, actually any letter in modern calligraphy, it's how you like it and you make the lettering your own. Another difficult one we come across is the letter K. The letter K can be written different ways. Also, to mention here in this guide, I always like to encourage you to practice your entrance and exits every single time you do any practicing, because it will prepare you for your projects and teach you to be ready for the next letter and the next stroke when you always include your entrance and exit strokes. So here in the letter K has your entrance, your ascending loop, and a half compound curve is what some might call it, with an extended exit stroke. So we put it all together. You have ascending with the half compound curve. I find it, the reason I demonstrate it this way, I find it a lot cleaner to draw it this way as opposed to adding that extra loop. It starts to look cluttered and you have a double loop there. But again, that's another way to write the letter K. Letter M and letter N, if you don't write it exactly with every single stroke, and I guess that goes for every letter, but definitely these two, if you don't write the strokes that are in the letter, more than likely you won't be able to see the thick and thin. So these, you definitely want to practice breaking, lifting your pen in between every stroke. So we have an overturn, two overturns, and a compound. When you put them side by side, creates the letter M. And what you do on the second stroke, you put your second stroke just barely touching the previous stroke to blend in. And creates the letter M. Let me demonstrate that again. So we have an overturn, just barely touching the second overturn, and a compound. And again, same thing for the letter N. So this is one overturn and one compound. Just barely touching the overturn, adding a compound, and you can see the thick and thin. Let me see, another one, the letter X. When you do your letter X, you want to remember to do your cross through down, up, not up, down. Not this way, because when you start from the top down, you end up with a heavier hand, just because we learn every downstroke is heavier pressure. So anytime you do the letter X, you do your cross through from the bottom up for light pressure. I'm not going to go through every alphabet, but that's pretty much how you learn your alphabet breakdown, and practice your alphabet and your strokes from the very beginning and anytime you're going to start any project. Can I get any questions before we move on? Any comments in the comment section, Debbie?
I haven't opened it up. Let me open the chat section. Nope, there's nothing. But go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself, you guys, if you have a question. You can interrupt Rachel anytime to ask something.
Definitely, questions are very helpful in these Zoom meetings. I only teach based off experience in having the class for a couple of years and try to go over everything I usually get questions about. Okay, so we're going to move on to page 4. And here we have our brush lettering basics. And what I mean by our basics are the top tips I recommend while learning your calligraphy, your modern calligraphy. Always keep in mind, every time you have a downstroke, it's with heavy pressure. Every time you have a light stroke, your upstroke, I'm sorry, it's with light pressure. So another way of explaining it is every time the pen, let me use a different color. Every time your pen goes in a motion towards your body, it's going, and of course downwards, it's going to be heavy, full pressure. And anytime a stroke goes upwards away from your body, it's going to be a light pressure. Tip number 2, you want to keep your pen at a 45-degree angle, not up and down. You will not get your thick strokes that way. So holding your pen at a 45-degree angle and sometimes holding it in the middle of the barrel, like tip number 4, will definitely help you with creating your thick and thin strokes. And then tip number 3, always release before the bottom. So if you don't release before the bottom, you end up with too much pressure here. Soggy bottom. We don't like that. We want a clean underbelly. So keep in mind when you're coming down, full pressure, and mentally prepare yourself to release before the bottom and go up into light pressure. So here's with the true flexible pen, release before and then into light pressure. Okay, those are my number 4 tips for brush lettering basics. Next half of the page, we have foligraphy. I always like to teach foligraphy for multiple reasons. One, you can create foligraphy when you do not have a flexible pen. So, or a Crayola. So example, a pencil. Here is a same thing like a pen, but this is what we have, a Micron pen. So that means, Micron is a monoline pen, meaning it's not flexible. Same thing for this would be considered a monoline pen that is not flexible. So when you don't have a flexible tip, you can create faux calligraphy. Another reason you can create faux calligraphy purposely, leaving the spaces open to add color, embellishments, florals, or doodles for some projects. And another reason is it teaches you where the thick and thin strokes are on your calligraphy letters. Okay, let's go ahead and practice with a, let me do my monoline pen because it's darker. So here on the dotted line, we're just going to start by writing the word hi, but I do want you to, let's keep our calligraphy strokes in mind. So that's what's considered a downstroke. I'm going to have a compound curve and then an underhand turn. And then you're going to add a downstroke, second line, on a second line on your downstroke. So that's here on the first stroke, here the second line on your compound curve, and the first line on your underhand turn. And this is my purpose number 2 is to create it, leaving it hollow so you can add color or embellishments. Or when you have a non-flexible pen, this is the part where you would add it, shade it in, and this is what we call faux calligraphy.
Rachel, can you go back a minute?
Yes.
Someone asked why is it called brush lettering on the worksheet as opposed to calligraphy? Do you want to explain that?
Brush lettering, well, that's the term came from, it falls into the category as modern calligraphy and brush lettering, because the brush lettering is what they call the brush pens because they have flexible tips. So anytime we're dealing with flexible tips, it's considered brush calligraphy. And the reason it's fallen into those titles is because it's not our copper plate calligraphy that we once knew long time ago, where you can only use a dip pen and ink. And in that, because you were using those types of pens, the strokes had rules. So I like I mentioned here, you could get creative and you could add extra loops and kind of make it your own, where that's where it falls into modern brush lettering. So as far as the word brush, it kind of it took on its word brush because of the flexible tips that are available with every single brand.
They're made with fibers, and then they come to a point. And that's why if you use it on rough paper, you're going to spread those fibers apart.
Right. So using these pens is what created the term brush lettering calligraphy. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So back to your high.
Okay. So yeah, no problem. I could just show it one more time so we can get the hang of it. So again, we'll do a different word. Let's do the word brush. Okay. So we'll have the downstroke. We have an oval. The R goes right into a compound curve, an underturn straight into an S, ascending into a compound curve. So what I just showed you was, even though it's not flexible with the thick and thins, you always want to draw it with enough spacing and with the strokes in mind. So once we go back and add our second stroke, you have enough room and the shapes look like calligraphy. So every downstroke, we're going to add a second line. And there's not an exact rule as to what side, if you would put the second line on the outside or in the inside. It mainly is preference, just depending on how much space you left and where it looks balanced. So for example, I actually have room on both sides of this stroke. I can easily add a second line to the left or the front. But see, when I added it to the inside, I actually ran out of space here on my loop. So that's something you want to keep in mind when adding your second stroke. But for now, we can just leave it like that. And then since I drew the compound curve here, I was able to add the stroke on the right side. So what I mean by adding colors and doodles and florals, just by using this color here, you can easily leave it open and add color. You can add 2 colors, do a nice ombre color with watercolors, or even, I know Sharpies might be a good blending depending on what paper you're using. Or you can go, if you want it to just look like calligraphy without a flexible tip available. Oh, one thing I also forgot to mention, another reason why you would want to know faux calligraphy is when you're doing a project that you cannot use a flexible tip. So for example, if you were gonna write on a picture frame with a Sharpie, I have it right here, a Sharpie oil pen. Well, of course, you can't find a Sharpie oil pen that is flexible. So knowing and practicing this way will get you prepared for a project like that. Or the same goes for chalk. So here we have a chalk marker. When you do a chalkboard art, or even just with classic chalk, that is non-flexible. So that's when the knowledge of faux calligraphy would come into play. So that's all I have on calligraphy, faux calligraphy. Do I have any questions before I move on from this subject?
Yeah, I don't see any questions. No one's asking anything. Okay.
Right, so next we have page 5. Here I added a blank sheet. I always like to recommend when you're starting off, always go through your whole alphabet multiple times if you can, and that's gonna definitely help you with muscle memory. One thing maybe I saw it on Pinterest one time, or I saw one thing or another, but I went ahead and went through my whole entire alphabet by using double letters. So what I mean is every first letter is gonna stay the same for your whole entire alphabet. And here I'm gonna demonstrate with different types of pens. So you can change a different type of writing utensil in between every line, or maybe every time you switch a letter. So since this month, our letter of the month is F, I'm gonna pick up from there. So what I mean is you're gonna start off with one letter. So letter F. And you're going, every second letter is gonna be the whole entire alphabet. So you're gonna repeat F through the whole entire alphabet. So you go F-A, F-B, and F-C. And again, you continue all the way until you get to the letter C. But of course, when you start, you're gonna start with A-A, A-B, A-C, and continue through your whole entire alphabet and challenge yourself to get through the whole alphabet. You can, like I mentioned, change maybe a writing utensil every time you start a new first letter. You can change a writing utensil for every line that you do. I think it took me 6 months to do my whole alphabet, A to Z, this way. And every time I would get a new pack of pens, that was my go-to. I would go to my notebook that I had my alphabet in, and that was my way to play with the colors and kind of see them, and I added to my alphabet drill notebook. So that was an example of how you would do the alphabet drills, but let me go back a step and show you when you're using a pencil, you can actually do the same thing. Instead of, with calligraphy, instead of doing thin and thick strokes, it's going to be considered light and dark strokes. So every time your pen is supposed to be a thin stroke, it's going to be considered a light stroke. And every time you go on a downstroke, you're going to apply pressure and your pencil is going to create a dark line. So again, so we have an oval, and on the left side it's darker, and on the right side it's lighter. And an ascending, light, full pressure down, dark pencil, exit with light pencil. That's another great way to practice your pressures using a pencil. Okay.
So Rachel, will you do double F for us and show us how some people try to keep those Fs identical and other people want to change them up? You know, like one will do like an embellishment on one of the Fs and not on the other. You know, double Fs are hard because they're so, to make them look identical. So there's ways to,
I get it,
purposely not make them identical.
Like the trend, like every time you have a double T or a double P, the trend is to switch up so that you take away from them looking identical. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. So how could you Show us
demonstrate.
first how two Fs look together, and then what you would do
Okay.
maybe for the second F or first F.
Okay. Just to continue, A, B, C, D, E, and then I'll do the F. So just showing you my small brush pen. We continue on the letter E to our alphabet, and then I'm going to demonstrate exactly what she said. Let me find another area. Okay, so double F. So what she means, instead of going and trying to perfect a double F side by side, this trend is doing an F maybe with an added loop and then an F regular. Does that make sense?
And then that way you don't have to worry about, oh, the loops at the top aren't identical.
Right. So, right, so this is like, okay, another way of writing an F, you can actually make your loop go all the way down so they can touch. So yes, so then what if my second F is too separated here? And when you're, like you said, like the word stuff, you don't want it to see too separate. And so they add an extra loop just to separate the looks. So maybe I can go.
Can you do that? Oh, go ahead. There you go. Can you do the second F with an embellishment at the top and then do like a higher loop and then come down? Do you know what I mean?
Okay. Yes. Like adding like a flourish, is that what you mean?
Yeah, flourish. Yeah. So come and do a flourish and do a higher loop and then come down to
so
the
like
F.
maybe adding a flourish to the top.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can. Something like that.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. So let me show you.
Yeah, let's see what, I know it's sometimes hard when you're thinking of something and.
Let me see. Let me show you on this camera.
Okay.
So I'll do it big so you can see. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
There.
Okay, now you can. So if you were to do a regular F that came down, and then you did something like this.
Out there. Oh, okay.
Does that still look like an F?
No.
No. Okay.
But
so that destroys the letter.
But then that depends on what that will work for, maybe a double T.
Oh, okay. Or an L. It would work.
Double L. Yes.
There we go. Okay,
That's
let me
probably
do that.
What you had in mind. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But no, that's a great point, because that again falls into modern calligraphy. Why it's modern, because you put your own touch and twist on everything.
And I think that's the thing about flourishes. You got to still make sure it's legible and readable. It does kind of destroy the F.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so just a couple more examples. Oh, we already did the double F, but we have continue on through your alphabet. Always practice your entrance and exit strokes, no matter what you're doing. It's gonna save you a ton of mistakes. One more, letter F with the letter G. So does that make sense? Every time you do a section, the letter in the front stays the same, but you continue through your alphabet. I'm gonna switch pens just so you can see different writing utensils you can use at home. Letter F. Oh, and also this teaches you the combinations. Yeah, there's combinations that probably will never be in a letter, but it's great practice. And we can use a regular pen. That didn't go as planned. I want to just show regular pen that we might just, everybody might have laying at home. Okay. So can practice that way or practice as a foligraphy. So maybe you can do a whole section of alphabet just doing faux calligraphy. They're leaving it open or coloring it in. And then lastly, I'll just demonstrate a large brush pen using 2 lines. I'll go straight across into 2 lines. Sometimes that's all you have on hand. And also, if you are using a Crayola, you might be able to use 2 lines as well, just because it is so thick. And there you go. So, alphabet drills. Sometimes you want to sit down, you want to do some calligraphy, and you don't have a quote on mind, just go right into this, and this is always fun and challenging to get through your whole entire alphabet. Okay, so for now, we're gonna skip the second half of the packet, and we're gonna go right into our letter of the month. We're gonna go over that and how we can write calligraphy in different styles. And page 6, 7, and 8 are more of information to take home, take away, and tips. We can go over that at the end of class. So if you have this, grab this. Let me grab another tracing paper. Okay, so here, like I mentioned before, I don't touch base on uppercase and copperplate. I never really did, but since I started creating this worksheet, I figured, well, let me just teach at least one uppercase every month, because uppercase is a whole different class of learning. When you learn modern calligraphy at the beginning, you always start with your basic lowercase letters. So let me go ahead and grab the Tombow pen and start with the letter F, which is our uppercase copperplate. Okay, so here we have the F in 3 strokes. You're going to start with, and yes, it does go below the baseline. Actually, yeah, below the baseline, descender. Okay, we have a downstroke, starts on the top left. I'm sorry, on the top, go down into full pressure and go left backwards into light pressure. And then you're gonna do a sideways S. No pressure, just using the tip of your pen. And this is another trick, like I mentioned at the beginning. If you go forward, you're gonna end up applying too much pressure. So going backwards, make sure that it stays thin. You can, this is a preference, you can decide to cross it, or if you wanna learn to start slightly below the slightly starting down and keep leaving room so that it doesn't touch. Oh, no, backwards. So let me demonstrate it here. So you can actually leave some space or let it cross. So that's touching. And that's without touching. And then with the cross, light pressure and heavy pressure down. Maybe not so big. Just a very tiny stroke. Sideways letter S, maybe a compound curve, and then down. Like that. I see with the copper plate uppercase, there are a set of words with the, how do I explain it? Like I taught you the very second page, number 2. The lowercase has our strokes. We have every stroke has a name, and with the uppercase letters, they have their own set of names that they use for their strokes, and that's a whole different class. Okay, so again, that's the uppercase. Here we have the letter F, just demonstrated that. It's best drawn in one stroke. I'll combine the entrance straight up into an ascending, go below the baseline, loop it up, touch the downstroke, and back with an exit stroke. Or you can make your upstroke longer so that there's not so much space in between. So however you decide you like the way it looks. Here I added a little extra flourish, what we might call a bounce letter F. Instead of going right into the letter F down into, starting from the bottom and going straight into it, I actually add an extra curve to the left. And then when I do my, instead of stopping there, I add an extra loop. So again, I start from, instead of going straight up, I add the loop. So like a letter S almost, and then add another loop in the middle. Okay, here I'm gonna grab my monoline pen and show you how I drew a faux calligraphy, capital F and lowercase f. I like to teach this because you also wanna learn if you wanna color it in and try to avoid doing a cross stroke so you can leave the open space without a cross line. So here I drew the F with an extra loop and stopped on the back line. And then instead of starting at the very top, I go slightly down and add the second stroke and then blend it into the first stroke. Same stroke as the top, go start from the top and do a sideway S and then continue on the other side as if it were connected to the back side. So let me demonstrate that before I move on one more time. And this one you can actually go down. I think I was meant to go to the second line to, when it's an uppercase or usually the first letter, it's always gonna be slightly bigger than the rest of the words. So that's why I made that top F bigger. So what I mean is drop it all the way down to the second line. Stop there. Instead of starting here, go slightly down Then add your second stroke. You can actually continue here and add your other half of the F, and then a sideways little S, like that, to avoid a cross stroke. So with the letter F, you're going to start with the main stem. Let's go slightly past the dotted line and just go full stroke that way. So a regular letter F with no entrance stroke, but then you want to go back and add your downstroke. Oh, that was too much. I'll do it one more time. And then add the line to the left as if it were an entrance stroke. So one more time. Regular letter F. And then add a fake entrance stroke. Okay. Next, I just added the word boo and trick or treat. Usually I'll have the quote of the month, and we're getting ready for, of course, Halloween next month. So thought I'd get ahead of the projects and start with trick or treat and boo. And I like to just add the quote there to separate the word September from our letter of the month. So we can just do a quick little practice of our quote. Here's a double O. That's a great practice. OR is another good practice combination. Okay, next we're going to move into the word September, and different ways we can write the word September. So we're just going to start off with the base word. Whenever performing any of most of the following ways of writing it, it's always good to sketch. So if you're going to do a big project or teach yourself some bounce lettering like I have here, or teach yourself some flourishes like I have at the bottom, when sketching, you want to always start with the base letters. What I mean is by base is it goes straight across, no extra flourishes, no extra embellishments, and no extra bounce. And from your base word, that's when you go back and add bounce and flourish to give it balance, because flourish and bounce is never the same in any letter. It's all about balancing and adding every other. So let's go ahead and start with the base word of September. And actually, I'm going to show you the different strokes that create the word September. So it starts off with the one stroke S. Letter E tends to be a one stroke. A reverse descender, an oval, upstroke. Letter T would be considered in the family of an ascending loop. Here, sometimes you would have to keep a flawless stroke. You sometimes do not have to always lift your pen. That's what I'm demonstrating here. So from the letter E into the letter M, this is the first stroke of the letter M, which is an overturn. The second stroke is a second overturn, and end with a compound curve. Have an ascending loop, oval, upstroke, and another combination of an E and an R. And what I mean by a flawless stroke is if you were to lift your pen, for example, with this letter E, if you were to write a letter E and stop right there, you sometimes, actually that looks good, but you sometimes will see, or it's hard to get right on the same path to form your second letter. So for example, what if I put my pen down and then I don't realize till after Debbie, did you lose me for a second?
Are you okay?
Yeah, a call was coming in. I got stuck there. Did
Oh,
you see me?
someone, okay.
Okay. Did you get this? Did you get this message right here?
No.
Okay. So like I was explaining, it's hard to stay on the same track. So sometimes if you were to accidentally go off track like this, you're not gonna like the too bad we can't zoom in, but you won't be able to have a perfect combination, and it'll be hard to get back on track where your pen just lifted. And that's where the alphabet drills and going through your alphabet will teach you where you can actually continue on to and combine strokes is what I mean. So doing that drill will kind of create your muscle memory, and you could remember, well, I'm gonna be able to lift my pen in between these strokes, but when it comes to combining a stroke like this, I'd rather continue on to create a flawless connection, if that makes sense. So you combine all those strokes. Okay. So let me see. So with the letter, again, so when you're beginning to sketch it, so when I created this whole worksheet, I always went back and started this way with the pencil. But here we're just, for fun and practice, just use this as a tracing paper. I mean, trace the bounce letter that I created. So you can see how I made the bounce look balanced, and you don't see double bounces side by side. So what I mean here is I wouldn't add a bounce to the letter E because the S and the P already have a drop shape. The letter T, I slightly dropped it below the baseline, and then I skipped a few and I added a bounce to the top, and then went opposite and went down. But then of course I wouldn't add too much to this, basically like leaving spaces in between every downstroke. I mean, every bounce down or every bounce up. Again, adding balance. We can go ahead and move on to the block lettering. So the block lettering is the same thing. Every time your pen goes down, you want to apply pressure, and every time your pen goes up, you're going to use the tip of your pen. So calligraphy pressures in mind. So since I'm going up, I'm going to release and it'll be light. down pressure, light cross, down pressure, light on the loop, thick on the downstrokes, light on the cross strokes, light on the upstrokes, heavy on the downstrokes. Block lettering is fun to learn too, because it's always good to mix block lettering with calligraphy and quotes. You'll see that a lot on the internet as well. Maybe a certain word, every other word will either be block or calligraphy. They'll do a nice pattern that way. Here we have September written in faux calligraphy. How did I do this one? I think I started here and stopped, did the S shape and went all the way backwards. That's a complicated one. And then I added the downstroke last. Let me show that one more time. Started with the entrance, left a space, went with the S shape, but went backwards and added a loop there. And then went back and added the downstroke. This is kind of hard when I'm tracing and showing at the same time. So here on this full calligraphy, I purposely added the second stroke at the exact moment of drawing every shape because I wanted to avoid the cross strokes. Because earlier in the worksheet, I said just go through and add it after, but this is for the purpose of leaving the spaces open for filling in with color. Oh, that was weird looking. There you go. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to what I call an expanded form. This is a pretty long letter, so sometimes when you're doing smaller letters, the expanded form might be, you might even expand about 2 letters across to get to your second letter. Again, when the words are shorter. But basically expanded forms, all they mean is an extended entrance and an extended exit. So naturally, you're going to want to stop your pen right about here as soon as you're done with that stroke, but continue on and continue on with your exit stroke to get ready to write the second letter. And then here on the flourish, I hope you were able to see the difference with the gray and the black, so you could see when you're writing the word, you can add the flourish afterwards. Here's a different way of writing the letter S. So here I'm going to stop there so I can show you how I added the flourish. Again, the base word here. So here on the letter P, continue on the downstroke, light pressure, cross over, and add a loop. It's almost like a sideways letter L. I know since this is a smaller paper, if they do look more circle, but you want to keep flourishes more at a oval. So anytime you add flourishes, keep an oval shape in mind opposed to adding a perfect circle. And here on the letter T, I actually went backwards again to avoid any thick strokes. So I started all the way over here, added a loop, and crossed my T. So there's just a worksheet of showing you different ways to write the letter F and different ways to write the letter S. I mean, the word September. Sorry. Do I have any questions?
We can unmute yourself if you have any questions.
I'm going to briefly go over these last 3 pages, and then we can do a little Halloween quote just to practice some more lettering together. So let's jump back into our workbook so we can go over page 6. Okay. Okay, so with the guidelines, here in the workbook, I showed you different, I mainly worked with these just so that we can focus on the strokes mainly. But when you get more into your lettering and figuring out your lettering style and printing out guidelines on the internet, you're going to come across different types of guidelines, and you're going to realize that these guidelines actually have names when it comes to learning calligraphy. So we have our ascender height. That's usually where, again, ascending loops will touch. We have our waistline and baseline. In between the waistline and baseline is considered the X height, and that's where our main body of letter is formed in between those two. Here in our worksheet, we actually use the first line, and that would be our basic grade school 2 double lines, and I showed you the waist and baseline X height on the second line. That's just basic, just to get in and get out and just learn your basic strokes. You can use this one. Okay, so back up, the last line is the descender. That's of course where all your descender loops are gonna fall, and when you're learning bounce, it's going to go below your baseline and sometimes touch all the way to the descender line. And again, beginner, basic, grade school, without any confusing line names, just easy to get started right away using the double line. And then you move on to a grid. So this is what we call a grid with a slant. You can also find grid style with the slant going up and down. Using these type of guidelines will help you with consistency and help your letter form go in the same direction, and again, helps with muscle memory. This size is more for a small brush pen. And then here is an example of a large grid with slant, and this size is good for a large brush pen. you can't find guidelines with slants and grids, you can always go with a lined paper. Using a lined paper, you can actually, let me get my tracing paper to show you this part. So with lined paper, you would kind of find your own X height. If you were going to use a small brush pen, you would want to use one line for your X height. The line above will be your ascender and the line below will be your descender. And if you're using a large brush pen, you can go all the way up to either using 2 lines or even using 3 lines, just depending on how large your brush pen is. But you want to keep in mind, if you are going to use 2 lines for the X height, you want to go 2 lines below and 2 lines above. And if you were to use 3 lines, same thing, 3 lines below and 3 lines above for your ascender and descender. And this is when you're going to create your own guidelines instead of printing something like these. You can also find dot paper. Rhodia dot paper is a great one to find. And this too, you would create your own lines by finding your X height, even using a pencil and ruler to make guidelines. 1 row would be for smaller brush pens, using 2 rows for medium and 3 rows for large brush pens. You just find what works best for you, what works best for the tools you have on hand at the moment. But this is just a little extra information of things you might come across when searching the web and coming across more calligraphy terminology and guidelines. Kind of see what works best. On page number 7, just some little tips to take home with you. You want to be consistent with your letter size. So that's when you use your guidelines to teach you how to be consistent. You don't want to, kind of like me and Debbie mentioned with the letter O's or the double letter O or double letter F. You want to just make sure every stroke kind of stays within the same height, or every oval is not too skinny or too wide. You want to keep everything in sync. Choose an angle and stick with it. So you're either going to go in an upwards motion or in, up and down straight or at a slant. And that's what I mean by choose an angle and stick with it just for that specific quote or practice. Not every single time. You don't have to. Just stick with it forever, just for each project. The spacing between each letter should be the same. That's kind of what I mentioned during the foligraphy, and it's also the same thing when you're using brush pens. Use guidelines, I mentioned that. Create lines with ruler and graph paper or blank paper even. Lift your pen after every stroke. Practice entrance and exit strokes while writing your ABCs. Practice your alphabet drill. Use wrist and arm motions. So instead of just trying to go here and write without moving, you want to practice using your wrist and even your elbow to create thick and thin. Sometimes you can teach yourself how to just stay in one space, or you'll be able to learn that way over time. But if you're having difficulty in the beginning, try using a whole arm, wrist motion to create those up and down strokes. Practice rows and rows of basic strokes. Try different writing tools. That's what I showed you in today's class. And again, practice helps with muscle memory, which helps with shakiness over time. Some basic supply recommendations. We just threw this out here. These are the names if you were to search the web: Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Amazon, Walmart is starting to carry. Nowadays, it seems this calligraphy brush pens and flexible tips are pretty much everywhere. Right off the bat, these are the brands that we recommend on paper. These are the brands we recommend on brush pen. The list can go on. I could have filled up a whole sheet. It's not, I mean, I have so many brands, but just as beginners, this is what we recommend. Everything's great. Any brush pen you get is great. As long as it's flexible, you can get the job done. Don't think that you just have to get these brands. It's just from day one, you're not too sure what you want, just start there. Other brands that we know and love, Crayola and Sharpie, have flexible markers now. If you're into watercolor, those are a Pentel gouache brush is nice. Use small paint brushes to create small calligraphy strokes. If you're into dip pen, actually, Debbie, we need to do a dip pen class soon. Those are some name brands we recommend.
The problem is the pens. I guess maybe we could do a kit and check it out to people. Yeah. And then they have to return it. That might work. Okay.
We'll think on it. For the envelope class I had in mind, but okay, we'll talk about that. So that's it. Just go over that, some brands we recommend on supplies. And this is just a takeaway. Like I mentioned, Uppercase is a whole different class. Haven't really touched base on it. I like to at least do 1 letter a month. Every worksheet I create every month is actually based off this worksheet, maybe with a little twist. For the most part, I created the same uppercase. I create the same uppercase every month. And then I added my lowercase letter to the bottom. Just like I mentioned, page number 3 being a good, guide through your calligraphy journey, having it off to the side every time you're going to sit down and practice. This would be another good one to practice. Uppercase is you're going to just change up the style depending on what project you're doing, because not every project is going to look very uniform and modern calligraphy. I find myself using capital, not capital, what's the right word? You can find yourself using a up and down. One second. Okay, I thought it was. Sorry about that. Okay. You won't, depending on what projects you're doing, you probably won't, the style won't look good if you use a copper plate. So I find myself doing a project starting with a block first, the first letter being a block letter and then following with calligraphy. So the point I'm trying to make, every project you do is going to always be different when it comes to your first capital letter. But again, this is just a guide. I don't really go into depth with it, but just to have and practice over on your own time. So if you have a little time to stick around, I'm just gonna do a fun little Halloween quote that I found off the internet. And you can use a blank paper. Here I'm gonna just use I have a mixed media paper. You can use just plain Jane printer paper if you want, just to a little takeaway quote for you. You can practice this quote and add it either to a pumpkin or doing a picture frame, writing it on a piece of paper, adding some color, adding some doodles, some Halloween doodles if you want, putting it in a picture frame, hanging it up. You can do different things. Just because we're going to write it on a piece of paper, you can always go and write it on a different type of hard surface. So when you do quotes, you always want to start by finding the middle. So I like to find the middle by just basically folding it in half. The less lines, the better. What I mean by lines is sketch lines. So once you find the middle, you want to sketch out your quote before you actually write with ink. So here is the quote I'm actually gonna do. I thought it was pretty cute. If you're into wood art, maybe, because here's a picture, showed a big wood sign, piece of wood that was painted with chalk probably, and you can easily do this with your own type of lettering, hand lettering. So I'm gonna need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. Wow. Okay. So here I want to start off. So I know the word, since this is smaller, will be shorter, not so big.
Rachel, do you want to pull your paper down a little?
Okay.
Please?
Oh, you know what? I forgot I need to do it darker. Okay.
Yeah.
So here I'm sketching. So when you're at home, this is how light you want it to be. And when I say sketch, literally barely anything, but I'm going to start writing dark. So don't copy and write dark like me. But you kind of want to find your placement by sketching. And on every other line is going to be, oh, you know what? I did it backwards. I wanted this to be calligraphy.
Just flip your paper over.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, that's what I wanted. Okay, I want home, devil, witch, and monsters to be calligraphy. And then of a handsome, a wicked, and their little, that's going to be the cat. So, okay, one more time. We're going to do calligraphy.
Yep, you got to pull it down again.
Oh, there we go. Home. Remember, sketch. And then we'll do cap, block letter. So you obviously can see that it's not straight. And that's the whole reason I recommend pencil, because then you can always go back and erase and find your balance. So go ahead and put the word handsome. Oh. Completely on the right side of my center line. So then let me see. Of, nope. A, and then of to the separated. So that's another way to do it, is always starting from the middle and working your way out so that you can have good spacing. And then we're going to do devil in calligraphy. Do an extended entrance there. Let's do see there how I kind of went down, came off the center line? And then we'll do oh, this is a good way to teach the TH. And let me put there, right in the middle. And okay, and then let me see. Okay, so this is just me showing you my process. So if you were to sketch this, you take a moment, erase every kind of, oh, I don't like the way this looks. It looks like I have some space. I can move this word down as much as I can. And you just take your time to perfect the spacing. If you want to get more complicated and perfect everything, you would get a ruler, space out 2 inches for every big calligraphy letter, maybe ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch for the block lettering. Here with the TCH, I actually extended my ascending loop to the H, to cross the T and go into the letter H. And again, when you take your time, if you were to do it on a different platform, sketching is the way to go. And then let's do orange and black. All right, so I'm going to do every calligraphy letter in the word orange, but I'm going to flip this over because you will not be able to see my colors. I just wanted to show you the process of creating a masterpiece. If you have an easier way of doing it, go ahead and do it your way. I just found that this works best for me. Okay, so I would naturally have my sketch right below here, very light pencil markings, and then I would trace right over it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and freehand this. Home. Add a little bounce. And then for the black, let me do too short. Oh yeah, one thing I also mentioned, I forgot to mention, when it comes to anything you're doing, just because your marker made the line this thick, you can always go back and add a second line just to make it thicker. So like faux calligraphy. So just because you're using a flexible pen doesn't mean you have to stick with that shape or thickness. And if you want a little thicker, just go back and add a second line, just like faux calligraphy. And I find this helpful on big projects like this so that you can really see that thick and thin. All right, well, that's it for today's calligraphy class. Hopefully you can recreate this project on a chalkboard art, or maybe something nice you can put in your yard for Halloween with your Halloween decorations, or maybe a wood sign you could put inside your house.